the first few months of preschool, I apparently didn't say anything. And it was so much like that my teacher actually went to my parents and they were worried, like, oh, he's not talking. Does he understand things? Like, what's going on? And then the next few months, I just wouldn't stop talking. And for me, it's like just that funny story of I was absorbing all the information around me. I was learning English because I learned Portuguese first growing up, and then I learned English through school. To me, that was really the first moment of, okay, now I feel comfortable and I'm going to go out and put myself out there in the world. So I think later in life, the first instance was really around music, is I grew to become a really strong musician. I studied classical saxophone in college. And through music, what I found is I found not just my voice in helping others to grow their music skills and helping to teach other people, but I found also my voice in the instrument of performing in front of people and being on stage and doing all of those things.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unmuted Moments. I am your host, Ahis, and today I am thrilled to be joined by Bruno Yoshioka. He's based in Seattle and is a principal software engineering manager at Microsoft. But while in college, he studied music in addition to engineering, and he actually wanted to be a music professor. But he has a very deep passion for mentorship, especially helping young professionals to unlock their potential. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So in today's episode, we're going to dive into what mentorship really looks like. How do you find great mentors? What makes a good mentee? And how does helping others grow actually help you find your own voice? So Bruno, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Ahis. Can't wait to jump in and talk all about mentorship.
Excited to have this conversation as well. And as we're discussing prior to recording, I mentioned how we initially first got to know each other. So I think you post a lot on LinkedIn, and you posted something around career mentoring, and I post on similar topics as well. And so I added you as a connection, and then you sent me a very personalized message wishing me a happy birthday. And I thought that was a really nice touch and was very thoughtful of you. So I guess maybe that's one lesson for today for listeners listening. If you want to build genuine connections and set yourself apart, try to find things to do differently. In this case, it was a very personalized message. And that really made me want to get to know you even more. And that led to this conversation. So thank you for doing that. I really appreciated that.
Absolutely. I love doing those messages for people. And it's just great bringing joy to people around the world, making the connections.
It's not something you'd expect, right? And like in my case, people DM me a lot on like LinkedIn to get to know me, to hear about career opportunities at my current employer. So that was definitely different. And it definitely sort of made me stop and say, oh, wow, who's this person? So thank you. So before we jump into sort of mentorship itself, let's get to know you on a personal level. So you have a very interesting background, born in Brazil.
That is right.
Japanese parents and then raised in the US. So can you walk us through that, your experience growing up and how that impacted or shaped your voice?
Yeah. So I'm of Japanese descent, born in Brazil, grew up in the US, and I spent most of my time in the US. And it's been really interesting looking back, just reflecting on how all of these different cultural backgrounds have influenced me in my life. So when I think about my Japanese heritage, it's a lot of the sense of community and fitting in and not sticking out too much. When I think about my Brazilian culture, it's really about I think about soccer and the sport and the fun, just that Latin energy. And when I think about the American culture, it's about that individuality and chasing your dreams and dreaming really big. And I've seen all of this really play into my life. But growing up, what I remember is actually a lot of times feeling like I didn't quite fit in, whether it was people around me didn't look the same as me, or I would go to a friend's house and I'd be eating food that seemed really unfamiliar to me because it was just different from what I experienced at home. But over time, what I found is I gained a lot of confidence through building competency. So in my early childhood, it was really learning English was like the very first time where I built this competency and a skill. Later in life, it was music and it became engineering. And that's really what's helped me to find my voice throughout my life is building confidence through competence.
It kind of reminds me of this saying of be so good that it can't ignore you. I guess that's the whole point of competence. So in your background growing up, was there any moment that you stepped into your voice where you realized my voice had power or you got confident in your own voice? Was there any moments like that for you?
Yeah, there's this funny story that my mom tells me from when I was in preschool. And I think this is really like the earliest moment of this happening. But the first few months of preschool, I apparently didn't say anything. And it was so much like that that my teacher actually went to my parents and they were worried, like, oh, he's not talking. Does he understand things? Like, what's going on? And then the next few months, I just wouldn't stop talking. And for me, it's like just that funny story of I was absorbing all the information around me. I was learning English because I learned Portuguese first growing up, and I learned English through school. To me, that was really the first moment of, okay, now I feel comfortable and I'm going to go out and put myself out there in the world. So I think later in life, the first instance was really around music, is I grew to become a really strong musician. I studied classical saxophone in college. And through music, what I found is I found not just my voice in helping others to grow their music skills and helping to teach other people, but I found also my voice in the instrument of performing in front of people and being on stage and doing all of those things. So there was kind of this duality of finding my voice musically and finding my voice outside of music as well. And then most recently, it's really been at work when I became a manager. That was really a big turning point where I had to find my voice. I was almost forced in the position of finding my voice, of having that role. But I'm super, super grateful to have had the opportunity. And being in that leadership role has helped me to continue to develop my voice throughout the years.
So it sounds like for you, this idea of mentorship started like way, way back when. Was there any sort of role models that come to mind for you in those early days that you wanted to emulate or be like as you grew up?
Yeah, I really think about my music teachers. I had a private lesson teacher in high school who was incredible, incredible musician. He's a saxophone professor today. And he taught me so much about growing myself as a musician, just getting to the point where I was going to college, actually studying the instrument and getting better at my craft. And he was a really big influence in what I look for in teachers and mentors as well. Just very calm energy, really focused on helping me grow and develop, and just a lot of skill and a lot of experience that backs up everything that he taught me. And so he's definitely a big role model. Other teachers as well. My saxophone professor in college was incredible. So thankful I got the chance to work with him. Those are really the people initially early on that I found to be really great teachers, really great mentors. And on the career side in engineering, I've had a couple managers that have just been extraordinary in helping me to grow and providing opportunity for me, and also just being incredible people and helping me along throughout my journey.
It's incredible. Even from my own story, from that first episode, I shared how part of my journey was inspired by a professor. It's just amazing how much impact teachers have, whether college professors, even in elementary or high school. And you wonder why teachers are not paid more. They have such an outsized impact in our lives and who we become. And it's like, at least in today's world, like teachers just often struggle. It, to me, just never adds up how much impact they have or the value they create for society and how much we value them in terms of like what it's pay, compensation. But that's a topic for a different podcast, I'm sure. So just researching for this episode, you've mentioned how you became an engineer by accident. So can you walk us through and how that impacted when you actually started, like early on? What sort of challenges did you have that you had to overcome?
Yeah, the context of how I ended up in engineering is when I first started college, I was really super focused on music because I had this dream of I'm going to do my undergrad, my master's, my doctorate, get all my degrees, and then I'm going to go pursue becoming a professor of music and be teaching saxophone. That was the goal. That was the dream. And it really wasn't until I had an internship at Microsoft that I realized like, oh, engineering is an option for me. Like now I have this on the table and I can go pursue this. And so I made that decision ultimately to take a chance on engineering and see where it went. And it was funny stepping in because I was all of a sudden I was surrounded by all these people that had this background in engineering, and that was their focus throughout school. And there was a lot of imposter syndrome early on because I felt like, ooh, do I belong here? Like, I don't know if I'm as competent as these people around me. And so a lot of doubt. I also truly felt like I didn't really know what I was doing initially. I feel like a lot of new hires have that experience of going to work and realizing, oh, this is not like school at all. It's a very, very different type of environment. But I managed to grow. I leveraged a lot of what I learned in school about how to learn. And I had this advantage of learning both on the music side and on the engineering side throughout college. that helped me to just become successful at learning and picking up knowledge in the workplace, I also found that I was able to build relationships with people in my job. The combination of those two things, learning how to learn and making those relationships, really helped me to grow quickly throughout my career.
That's awesome. In terms of those relationships, mentorship is one way to find this relationship and cultivate this relationship. So I guess in your experience, what have been some ways you have been able to like find those mentors? Some companies would have very formal programs or mentorship programs where sometimes they actually find you a mentor, they create that mentee-mentor relationships and say, go have fun. And sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. I guess in your experience, like how have you found those mentors that have been impactful in your own career?
What's helped me the most has been talking with my direct manager about what I'm looking for. Usually when I'm looking for a mentor, I grow a skill set or I'm facing a lot of challenges and I want to talk to somebody who has experienced that and they've overcome those and they understand the process at which they went through in order to do that and to be successful. So I've actually leveraged the leaders around me that I have a relationship with already. In the beginning, it was really my direct manager of talking to them about what my aspirations were. And then they would find people around the organization that would be a good fit for me. And building that relationship with my direct manager is really the key piece of what helped. I have found that I could seek out more opportunities on my own just because I had created more of this network at work. So I knew more people, I knew who I could talk to. And I have this community now where if I need something and I'm looking for mentorship, I can go and reach out to a bunch of people who would probably know somebody that could help me. And I can network my way to eventually finding somebody. And those are the two ways that I think really worked out well for me.
I really love the idea of targeting it to a specific skill. Like I have a specific problem, I'm trying to learn a specific skill, and who around me can help me or coach me and mentor me in that specific area. Because sometimes, so as I mentioned, in those company initiated arrangements, sometimes you just go in there like, all right, I'm here because they told me to.
Yeah.
What do we have to talk about? But I imagine in a situation where you have an actual problem you're trying to solve and you have someone who have experience in that, like that's something you both could talk about and tackle. In my experience, some of my closest mentors now are people who I have worked with before in some capacity, who really understand me, they understand the role that I do. Sometimes in those forced type of relationships, if you have someone from marketing and you're engineering, they may not understand what you actually do. There may be like very senior managers in that department and know how to lead people. But when it comes to your actual day-to-day challenges, they can't really relate to it. In my experience, some of the people I've stayed closest to are people who I used to work with in the same team or who I used to report to, but in a different team now. So they're a bit removed. I can get advice from them and know it wouldn't impact my performance review or anything like that. But like they do understand from a day-to-day basis, like what I am dealing with. And two, they understand how to troubleshoot and how to address some of those problems, like who I can go talk to. I could say, hey, this is the project I have on my plate and these are the problems I'm running into. From their experience, they know, okay, have you considered talking A, B, and C? And so that's even not just within the same company, even in my old companies, some of my old bosses or managers I've kept in touch and it served me well. Not just bosses, even just colleagues too. And it's also opened doors. Even some of my jobs that I got was a former colleague who left the company, but I stayed in touch with. And then they were like, oh, this spot opened up in my current company. Are you interested? Actually, for my first job from KPMG, so I started off in public accounting in New York. So KPMG is a public accounting firm. And then I had a colleague who went to Goldman Sachs at the time, but we still kept in touch. We still talked about work, talked about all the different stuff. At that point, to be honest, I never thought I was going to leave. It wasn't my intentions to leave, but I kept in touch with him. And we would just, I think once a month, we would just like check in and talk. And then one of those months he said, hey, there's a spot that opened up in my team. Like, would you be interested? I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And then I interviewed for it and it worked out and I made the switch. So I use that story sometimes just as an example of like keeping in touch when you have, those people you built a relationship with. It could be very beneficial to keep in touch even after those people leave your team or leave the company.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think mentorship too, a lot of people look at mentorship and they feel like, oh, it's such a commitment. Like I need to have this regular schedule and I need to meet with this person all the time. You can have mentors that you don't meet with that often. I know some people who meet with mentors once a quarter or every 6 months. And I think it's great to have people that are external and great to have people that are internal and a mix of people that know you well or people that know you a little bit less well, because you'll just get different perspectives. And then you get the chance to see everything and get all the feedback from all sorts of different people. And then you bring that as input into what you do day to day. And I think that's a really powerful piece around mentorship.
So this frequency piece that you mentioned, I think it's very important because I think that's one of the things that make people not want to do it. Like, okay, I got to meet with this person once a week or twice a month. And do I have time? I have a lot on my plate already. I don't have time for this extra thing. So I know you mentioned how it doesn't have to be like very frequent. It could be once a quarter. But in your experience, how do you manage this? Like, how do you have time to manage this relationship? And at least in the beginning, what frequency usually works for those sort of mentees that have done well and moved on and achieved whatever goals that they had?
Yeah. Weekly sometimes feels like it's too frequent.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you end up with this like topic fatigue where the mentee
Uh,
has this feeling of, oh, I have to bring
I
a
gotta
new
come over.
topic every single week,
I've
right?
been
And it's
there.
like, yeah, too much work. So
Yeah.
I usually start with, I might do 2 weeks in a row, and it's
Yep.
more for let's talk and do intros first in the first meeting. And then the second meeting, let's talk topics. Let's make a list of what you want to hit. And then after that, I usually will do every 2 weeks for maybe a quarter, and then we'll just reevaluate. The other thing about the frequency is also don't need to have an infinite relationship with your mentor in a formal mentoring relationship. You can meet for 6 months, and if you feel like, cool, I got everything I wanted, I learned a lot, and this has been great, we can still stay in touch, but you don't want the time on the calendar to be meeting regularly and you want to go to more ad hoc, that's also totally fine. The every 2 week cadence typically works for me for new mentees. I do have some people where I just meet less frequently and it's more ad hoc. Like they'll come to me when they need something and then I'll open up time on my calendar and we'll get together and talk.
Yeah, I've definitely been in those situations where you have one of those meetings in your calendar and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't have anything to do this week, but I
Yep.
got to come up with something. That's why I guess for me, those relations where I already had something I've worked with that person before, we had something in common. Like even if I don't have a pressing problem, like oh, what's going on these days? Like I could say something that resonates with them. They know like, oh, that's going on. Like we just talk about something. Or it could be shared interests outside of work too, right? It could be like sports. It could be like traveling. To the extent you have multiple things to talk about or multiple topics, I find that those relationships tend to stick more. It's not like every time it's not about like, oh my goodness, what topics do I have today? And at that point, it's just not joyful. Like
Yeah.
it's just not joyful. It's just like work. For me, I try to, when I get into this relationship, I try to find other areas of commonality, whether it's travel, sports, we have shared interest in particular sports or traveling, whatever it is. So if nothing else works, I'm like, all right, we're going to talk about sports this week, or we're going to talk about travel this week. And then I don't have to worry about it. So again, just sticking on the topic of mentorship on, I guess, on your mentees. So in your view, what makes a good mentee? Like from your experience, those people who have gone on and been successful, how did they cultivate that relationship? Like what have you seen to say, hey, like this person is really doing this right? And makes you want to continue staying in that mentorship relationship?
I want to see people who are open to driving changes. That's to me the biggest thing. Because if you aren't willing to work with them and take advice and apply the advice and drive some kind of change in your behavior and the way that you're approaching problems and the way that you're carrying yourself, then it may not be a good fit because that relationship isn't working. I think the goal with mentorship is always you're getting advice from somebody and it informs you in a way so that you can change something about what you're doing. So that's the number one thing is just being open to that idea. And I would say having an overall growth mindset because you might get information or advice from a mentor that you might look at face value and you'll think, I don't know if that will work very well for me. But I usually will tell people, give it a try. Let's see what happens. We're going to learn together and experiment. And it might work and it might not. We'll take the learnings, we can refine and continue to work together to make it better. So having that growth mindset and being open and willing to try new things and experiment, I think that's also really important in that relationship.
That's awesome. So yeah, I guess just from hearing that, it's just that being open to those new ideas. And I guess if you had that one specific goal or one specific problem you're trying to solve, hopefully you're coming in with a growth mindset to begin with. Hopefully you're also open to trying whatever new strategies that your mentor may share with you along the way to address or resolve those. So I want to talk about a couple of issues that young professionals would face. And one of them, this whole idea of voice and speaking up, as we discussed prior to the show. For me, one of the things that I had to deal with early on in my career was this whole idea of letting my work speak for itself versus me also speaking on top of that, right? So it's not just about the work itself, but you also have to speak for that, especially like from people from immigrant backgrounds. It's this whole idea of humility. Like if I start like talking and advocating for myself, maybe I'm doing too much. Have you ever find yourself in that, and how did you break away from it? What kind of strategies would you advise for someone who might be in that mindset to break away from that and be comfortable advocating for themselves and also speaking up when they do a great job, like say, hey, yes, I did this, and hopefully get some credit for the job that they've done?
Building your relationship with your manager and having them really be an ally for you to create some of those opportunities for you to be able to speak up and to highlight your work. Leaders in organizations really should help to create the platform and create the place for people to find their voice, to be able to talk about those things, or even to highlight the contributive people that are doing really, really great work. Find an ally in your manager, but also other people around you that can really help. I find early on in my career, I had a lot of challenge with just speaking up in general, just being the new person, not feeling like I had a lot of knowledge. One way that I really worked to combat that is I would find people who could help pull me into conversation. And I was really lucky to be on a team that had a really great culture around inclusivity. So what would started happening is in meetings, I would have people who would help to pause the meeting and pull me in. They might ask me a question and can give some space to me so I could give an answer and actually speak my voice and raise my voice. And I found that having that helped me to get comfortable over time with being able to do that myself and eventually build that skill to do that. But I think the same is true also for just highlighting your own work, is having people who are allies for you to be able to highlight your own work, and for you having that good relationship with your manager, because I think they should be a huge advocate for you if you're doing well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very important. It also reminds me of this idea of like small wins. And when you get into a new job, it's important to, because sometimes people think it has to be something big. Like you have to do something very big before you can take credit for something. And sometimes, especially when it's early on, I've shared stories where in some of the jobs I've joined, it's something like organizing a shared folder, like something very basic, or like when I go make a copy, I ask around who else needs to make a copy. And I think one of the things too in those type of arrangements is you build this relationship. An example of when I'm making a copy and say, hey, who else wants a copy made for them? And somebody say, hey, can you go make a copy of this? Like now this is an opening to talk to that person. And now it's not just my manager, it's this other person that I can then talk to, hopefully be during lunch and build some relationships with them. Another idea that came to me as you were speaking about having this opportunity where they let you use your voice in a meeting to maybe present something is this whole idea of, like sometimes when you do a presentation or slide, you work on a project, your manager could either present the thing for the team, or sometimes they say, hey, are you okay presenting? I go back and forth on this because sometimes early on, maybe it's best for a manager to do it. I don't want to make a mistake and make a fool out of myself. And sometimes like, okay, maybe I should do it. Even if it doesn't go well, I can then ask for feedback and say, hey, what went well, what didn't go well, and then get better. I go back and forth in terms of like when you should do this versus not. Do you have any framework in terms of like when you do a project or work, especially early on? Obviously, as someone like in your position, you probably present on project that you work on in your position. But for people who are very early in their career, the question is more, when should you raise your hand and say, can I present this? Versus just sitting back and learning and watching your manager present before you can start asking to present yourself.
I think that you can do it in an iterative way. So starting smaller, the smallest for me is you are in a room with one other person. So you're presenting an idea to a colleague. It could be your manager, it could be a peer, or it could be somebody else in your organization. But starting really small and just presenting the deck that you have for a presentation. And then take it one step larger, go to your direct manager and your team. So it's all of your peers, it's your manager who's there. So it's a bit of a more safe and comfortable environment. I think what this does when you iterate is you get these opportunities to also get feedback along the way. And so if you're prepping to give a presentation more broadly, you get the comfort of doing the presentation multiple times, but you also get the feedback so that when you go more broadly, you feel more ready and you've incorporated that feedback and you'll just feel more confident that it's ready to go. And that's what I find to be helpful, is taking more of that iterative approach. I think in terms of evaluating how high are the stakes in the presentation,
Yeah.
I leverage people around me. So if there's an opportunity to talk about something to my leadership team, I usually will go to my manager and have that conversation about, does it make sense for me to go represent? And I usually would volunteer. I would say, like, I'm happy to do it. I want to make sure that it's right. am I the right person to actually be presenting this content? Should we co-present it? Is it something that you should represent? And at least for us, there are some meetings where the lines are very clear, and there's some that are a little bit more blurry. But I've actually gone and taken some opportunity myself and been able to give presentations in those cases too.
It's very powerful. I think the takeaway here, for me at least, it's at least you have to have that conversation. I guess sometimes early in your career, you often just defer to a manager for everything.
Yeah.
And if you're that person listening to this conversation now, where you've worked on some project and you know you have it in your heart that I think it would be great if I actually presented on this. If you don't tell your manager, it's hard for them to know. They can't just say, hey, this person wants to present on this project he worked on, go present. And I guess it's on the manager to sometimes know when that time is. Ask that question to your manager. I did this project, I think nice at that, whatever team meeting, whatever meeting you guys present on. If I presented this, is that appropriate? You think this is the right time for me to do it? Or maybe I should find a smaller forum to do it? But the key here, as you mentioned, is at least having that conversation. Because it's hard for them to know what your goals are or to know that you're even interested in doing this at all if you don't voice it out and tell them. They could give you advice of, well, maybe I'll take this one, maybe you do the next one, or maybe we could just practice internally and then you do the next one. But at least at that point, you have a plan. And hopefully that manager will serve as a guide and help you along and give you any feedback. I was thinking about this. For me, the times I presented early on, the times I did present was I was asked to. It wasn't like I didn't volunteer to. And it just, I always didn't like the experience. I always didn't like it whenever I was volunteered to present. And whenever I would get feedback, I was lucky. In retrospect, it was good to have feedback. At that time, I didn't like it because it was always things I needed to improve on. So at that time, it was like, oh my God, I'm going to present and now I'm going to do this thing wrong and get a list of stuff I need to work on. But I think looking back now, I think it was a gift. Like, hey, they actually had the time after the meeting to take me inside and say, hey, this is what you did good, this is what you didn't do good, and this is what you need to improve on. But at the time, I didn't take it that way. But looking back now, I think it was a gift that they actually took the time to provide me this feedback. But again, as I mentioned, I think the first step is you actually talking to the manager and asking for those opportunities. In your experience, just outside of work, is there any sort of outside things that have helped you? I know there's public speaking classes, community programs. I guess for you, hobbies, I was going to ask about hobbies, but I guess you have your music. I was just trying to, just for listeners out there, like what other things outside of work itself can people use to develop that confidence in themselves and in their voice?
Yeah, personally, I work with coaches. I have 3 coaches I work with right now. I have a career coach, Zach. I have a communication coach, Brendan. I have an intuition coach, Dunya. Working with all 3 of them, they really help to elevate me in everything I do in my life. It's hard to find great coaches. And if you want to coach, I think you also need to be somebody who wants to be a good coachee, similar to being a mentee for a mentor. But it's something that for me has been super helpful. What I would say in general, though, is any kind of activity where you're developing a skill, I think is great, where you have somebody who has more experience that can help you develop that skill faster and help you get past the initial challenges in the beginning, and where you can see tangible growth over time. To me, that's really where a lot of value comes from activities outside of work. Because what that shows you is it teaches you progress in developing yourself in some way. And it could be a sport. You might want to learn how to ski or snowboard. You want to get better at playing soccer, like whatever it is. If you have those 3 components, I feel like that helps. And other hobbies I think are fun too. Like I'm really into anime and manga. And for me, that's really just about more around like storytelling and learning about these different stories and the way that they're told from a very different culture and just learning through that. And that's more information coming into my brain. And then how does that influence me in the way that I think? So I can find value in that as well. That's a little bit less like building a skill, but it's just more gaining information, gaining insights and perspectives that I think benefit me in the way that I think about life, the way I think about anything that I do.
Wow. I've heard about career coaches. And so from what I heard, you have 3 of them. You said a career coach, a communication coach, and a third, what's the third one you mentioned?
An intuition coach.
What is an intuition coach?
Yeah, so I work with Dunya. She's an incredible person. And she's really helping me with a lot of self-discovery of who I am, how I function, and helping me to lean into the qualities that make me me. So in a way, I'm learning more about who I am authentically and putting more thought into who I am. And then using the knowledge that I gain to really lean into some aspects of who I am and the way I like to do things. So one example is that I like to think really deeply. And there's been a lot of moments in life where I felt like it was almost detrimental. Like I'd be in a meeting and I'd be thinking about this problem, but I'd have a hard time speaking up because I need the space to think, right? And now I'm at this place where I am very much willing to just forego any of those thoughts and say, let me lean into the fact that I can think really deeply. And I might actually take this moment to pause the room in a meeting and say, give me a couple seconds. I have this idea, and then I'll be thinking through something, and then I'll give my thoughts after. This is another way for me to really lean into who I am and use that to find my voice in these different situations too.
That's awesome. This is the first time I'm hearing about the intuition coach. And has this sort of play into the career coaching? What the goals of career coach versus the goals of the intuition? I think I get the communications one. In terms of
Yeah,
the goals of the career one and the intuition one.
I think there's some overlap. I think about my career coaching that I've done, there's been a big focus on mindset. And I think that has some good synergy with just self discovery. They go hand in hand in some ways. And so I spent a lot of time on mindset work of changing the way that I think about things, dealing with negative thoughts, dealing with self doubt, and how do I handle that? And then the intuition part really plays into leaning into who I am, like I mentioned earlier. And I find that those two things end up meshing really well together. And ultimately, they help me with what I'm doing in my career right now. Because I face a lot of challenges, just mental and emotional challenges throughout my work, whether it's the pressures from above and below, or we have hot issues that we're dealing with our product. So there's a lot of these moments where things are really, really tense. And I've just built this resiliency over time to be able to handle those situations and to stay calm under the pressure.
Awesome. And I hope this is a lesson for listeners out there that even someone like you in your position, senior in your role, you still find the need to have coaches. I think sometimes too, people think it means that I have a deficit. Like if I go out there and look for a coach, it means I am explicitly admitting that I have some problem. It's not that. It's for you to get better and to do better. It's not saying, oh, I have this big problem, but it's like, I know I can be a better version of myself. After this conversation, I think I'm going to start looking into those and see how they can help me in my own career and my own journey. Talking about self-doubts specifically, what kinds of framework do you use? I imagine no matter how good you are, it's the moments, and no matter how high up you are in the chain or the ladder, I imagine there's still times when you're doing something new that you're uncomfortable about and those self-doubts creep in. So what types of framework do you use to overcome those when those moments come up?
When I'm feeling really stressed, I have this exercise that I use. I call it ETA. ETA stands for emotions, thoughts, and action. And what I do first is I have to acknowledge that I'm dealing with some challenging situation. The first thing I do is I think about the first couple emotions that come to mind. So it's just, I'm creating emotional self-awareness because I want to know when I'm feeling this way so I can catch it and actually deal with it and process it rather than just letting it take control. And I just think about the first couple emotions. They're usually negative emotions. So maybe I would say I'm stressed and I'm anxious. And then the next thing I do is I think about the first couple thoughts. These are usually the negative thoughts. Like I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm the right person to actually work on this. And I limit this to two because what a lot of people fall into is this trap of I keep thinking more negative thoughts. It's like, then this will happen, then this will happen, then this will happen. And then all of a sudden the world is ending when the reality is you're just sending an email to someone. And so it stops that spiral from getting too out of control, which is good. Whenever I feel that stress and I really love the word dread. This is a word that one of my friends taught me. And when you feel that feeling of dread, you really need to take action to go past it. And what I found through practicing this is whenever I take the action that's the next step forward, I just feel better because I'm making progress. And now I took this negative situation and I'm turning it into this positive experience where I'm making progress towards my goal, or in some cases, I'm just completing the task altogether and it stops taking up this mental space. Because if you let this stew forever, these ideas and thoughts and the stress stew in your mind, then what I have found is I'll go home at the end of the day and I'll be getting ready for bed and I'll be laying in bed and thinking, wow, I didn't do that task and it's really nagging at me. I need to get that done. And so it's better to just recognize what's the action you need to take and just go do it. I tell people to set a timer, like a 5-minute timer, a 10-minute timer, just take the action, get it done. You'll feel so much better because it's taking up all that mental space And now it gets thrown away because you took the action to move forward.
Awesome. And talking about action, I think one of your posts on LinkedIn was, I think you had your saxophone and you were talking about how you become better at the saxophone by playing it, not by reading about it. And I think it reminded me of this whole idea of showing up and taking action. Personally, for me and my wife, we go back and forth. We have different perspectives on this topic. But when I have a long to-do list, like for me, I can't really sleep. Even if I'm trying to rest, I can't. So I got to go do it. That's how I get through it. Some people are good at it. Some people can just turn it off. They could say, you know what? It's 6 o'clock or whatever. I am done with work. And right now it's just family time. But for me, sometimes I can't. Like even when I do the sort of family time, it's like 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Everyone is asleep. It's now me. But then I go back and start thinking. I start thinking about that. And for me, usually the action is just to go do that thing. I don't think it's probably the most sustainable thing. Where I try to sleep, but then it keeps bugging me and I can't. And then I go to my computer and then I work till like 2 a.m. I mean, there's one side of it is, okay, I am trying to knock those things off my list so I don't have to think about it. But there's another side of it is like, that's not sustainable. You shouldn't be doing that. So it's something that I don't think I'm good at because for me, I think I just usually want to power through stuff like brute force. Like if I have a lot on my, I'm like, okay, the one thing I can do is just power through it. Just keep doing it. And eventually I'll be done with it. But the truth of the matter is like, you're never done. There's always something. So I try to remind myself, so I know on one hand, we're talking about action, like showing up and trying to do those, and taking action. But when does it become too much and not sustainable? Like, how do you think through this?
Yeah, I love the example you have, Hayes, because I think a lot of us deal with that situation. And sometimes we do just go and we get stuff done. But you're right. The reality is there's always more work to do. So the list, even if you have a list, is never ending, right? It will never end. And I think there's two strategies that I use around this in dealing with that type of situation. One is it may not actually be that you need to go finish the work right now to actually get to a state where you can move on. Sometimes it's just about prioritizing so that you feel confident that when you wake up the next day, you know where to start, you know what to tackle. So I find that that creates that feeling of certainty for you where if you have a big to-do list, there's this uncertainty about, I don't know what to do first, or I don't know the first 5 things that are on my list that need to get done. So just organizing I find to be helpful and then tackle it the next day, the next morning. But if you're gonna work outside of core hours, the strategy I use is I make a list of what needs to get done that day. And it usually is work that can't wait till tomorrow. So I have to ask myself the question, what's the outcome if I choose not to do this today? And if the outcome is very bad, which sometimes it is, then I will say, cool, I accept I need to get this work done today, but I will have a list. That way it's finite. Otherwise you end up with that infinite work problem. And then as soon as the list is done, I just hit the log off button on my computer and I just go on with my day. And then I feel good because I got the things done that I wanted to get done and I can move on and leave it all behind. And then the next day I know I'm going to get back up and continue on that giant to-do list.
That's a helpful framework. What's going to happen if I don't get this one done today? And if I'm very honest, a lot of times nothing's going to happen. Like, if I don't get it done, nothing's going to happen. But it's just the idea of having something out there swirling. Yeah. Even if it doesn't need to be done that day, I just don't like the idea of having something open. I just want to close all the loose ends by the time I go to bed. It's something I'm still definitely working through each day. Okay, as we wrap up, I just have a couple of more questions. What songs do you go to? Especially, I guess you're a music guy. You're doing a big project and you need to be inspired and need to be like fired up.
Yeah, and I'll go a little bit off the beaten path. Some stuff that's a little bit less mainstream that people may not have heard of. But I love Polyphia. They're this instrumental only group and they have this song called Playing God. That's incredible music. Love it, love it, love it. And then the other one I would give to all of you is the song Over You by Jacob Collier. Slightly more mainstream, but I think people are still discovering his music. But yeah, those two, really, really great. I was just listening to Jacob Collier right before this to get me amped up. So that one's a great one.
Yeah, the final question is, if there's something that relates to mentorship that we didn't cover today that you think anyone listening to this conversation should go away with, is there any such thing that we didn't cover on the conversation about mentorship?
Yeah, something related to mentorship for everyone to take away. When I think about mentorship, it's all about getting the help that you need to progress faster. Go talk to the people that have been there and they've done that and they've achieved success because they'll pull you forward. I always think about this concept of who can I go to that's going to help pull me forward in my timeline? If I imagine my timeline of what I want to achieve in my life, in my career, Who are those people that have been there and they've accomplished it that are going to pull me forward so I can accelerate and continue to move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so that's what I would say around mentorship is be willing to go build those relationships and get the help from those people that will pull you forward. It's not a sign of weakness. I think it's really a sign that you're ready to grow. You want to make more progress, and there's people out there that can definitely help you to do that.
Amen. Amen to that. So finally, you specifically focus on people who are early career software engineers. So if we have any of those people listen, how can people sort of follow you or reach out to you who may want to just get to know you more?
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. My handle is B Yoshioka. I'm sure we'll have it in the show notes down below as well. Come connect with me, send me a DM. Happy to set up some calls with folks and have some conversations. We'd just love to connect. If you're early career, even if you're not, if you're later in career, you just want to chat, more than happy to connect and have some conversations.
Thank you. This has been such a thoughtful and energizing conversation. I personally learned a lot from it. So thank you for today and thank you for being here. As we mentioned, it's not a sign of weakness trying to get a mentor. It's just for you acknowledging that, you still have room to grow, and hopefully these mentors can help you along the way to growing and ultimately reaching your potential. So to everyone listening, thank you for spending your time with us today. Please don't forget to subscribe to Unmuted Moments on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And as always, you can reach me at unmutedmoments@gmail.com with any feedback or guest ideas. That's it for today. I'm Ahis, and until next time, stay unmuted.